And now, plan smarter and live better with investment advisor David Ortiz, the financial guidance program that offers answers to your investment questions and strategies to build a secure retirement. David Ortiz is a registered investment advisor with more than 26 years of experience, helping people with their financial and estate planning needs. This is the program about saving, investing, and growing your money, reducing your taxes owed, enjoying your life now and during retirement, protecting your assets, and even passing on a good legacy to your heirs. Plan smarter and live better through unique strategies that offer the highest income and liquidity possibilities. And now your host, David Ortiz.
Hello and welcome to Plan Smarter and Live Better with David Ortiz. DavidOrtiz.com works to preserve your retirement monies and guarantee lifetime income in retirement. I'm with David Ortiz and this is Jim Alden. I'm your host. Hello, David.
Hey, Jim. How's it going? Good to see you.
Good. Great to be here today. I want to talk very specifically about the landmines in retirement. And of course, by landmines, I'm talking about those unexpected things that can come up while you're in retirement that can blow up your nest egg.
That's a great thing to talk about because that's the one thing that I see are the things that people don't plan on. And today's retirement, as a matter of fact, is very different than ever before.
It really is.
Yeah, when I started doing retirement planning, I was dealing with a lot of people that had pensions, and 401ks were not really a necessary thing because they would put their 30 years in, get a gold watch, and get a pension that paid 80% of their working wage and Social Security, and most people could live a very comfortable retirement.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Nowadays, pensions are kind of a thing of the past, so they have to really put away some money to make up for the lost wages. So, for example, some of the things that we're going to talk about as far as the landmines are how long your money and income can last. Mm-hmm. Because if you're living off your savings, you don't have a pension, and therefore you don't know how long your money can last you.
Right, and you're constantly thinking in the back of your mind that I'm running out of money.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. The other thing is taxes. Taxes are not going to get any lower. As a matter of fact, they've gotten higher over time. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you need to factor in as well. People have a lot of money in 401ks and IRAs, and many of them don't want to take the money out because the taxes will kill them.
Right. They're kind of trapped in that regard. Yep.
That's
good
correct.
Point.
But as far as the other landmine is Social Security, there are over 700 different ways that you can take Social Security. And being that it is the number one income that people are receiving for retirement, it's important to make the right choice when it comes to electing Social Security.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm gathering, David, that a lot of the choices that retirees make are based on emotions, and when the stock market, for example, goes south, everyone instantly becomes irrational and they make decisions that are based on emotions that can often, bite them in the rear end, so to speak. So please talk about how emotions can have a big important part in decision making with these issues in retirement.
Well, I'll talk about the stock market when it comes to emotions. First of all, we've had a couple of recent corrections, if you want to call them that. Mm-hmm. I call them corrections, but they could be a big drop. One of those was back here last summer, where the market took a pretty heavy hit, and anything that was wiped away from an all-time high in May was taken back in July, August, and September. Mm-hmm. We had a slight recovery toward the end of the year, and then a 10% drop in 1 month, and that was in January.
Right.
But typically what happens, people see the market, taking, 200 and 300 point hits. Mm-hmm. They panic and they sell everything. Mm-hmm. And that's the emotional part of it.
Sure.
Where people like Warren Buffett see that happening, and they're on the opposite end. They're buying everything at a discount.
Right. Markets don't really trade on fundamentals, do they? They basically trade on the human emotions of fear and greed.
That's right. People typically get out when they're scared, and they stay in too long when they're greedy. Mm-hmm. But it has nothing to do with the actual performance of the market.
Right, and since we're talking to retirees that are listening to us today, David, I heard a great quote the other day. It was something along the lines like this: retirement might be the end of your work, but it's the beginning of the time where your money works for you.
Exactly, and that's the biggest issue that I see facing people. Many will have a certain amount of money, but they don't know how to turn that into income. People will use traditional methods, which is basically put it in the bank and try to live off the interest. Well, when the interest is all less than 1%, to make $10,000 a year, you need to have $1 million.
Right, exactly.
There's not a lot of people that have $1 million in a savings account.
Right, exactly.
Or people are using another antiquated method called the 4% rule, where with fluctuations in market and interest rates, they can take 4% of their portfolio out. Again, using $1 million as an example, that's only $40,000.
Right.
But if you were in the middle of that in 2008, you lost 38% in 1 year. Guess what? That strategy doesn't work either.
Of course. No, that's self-evident in hindsight, that's for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, today would be a great time to call. David has a free Safe Money and Information book for you that he wants to get into your hands. David's been in practice for over 27 years helping retirees with their safe money planning. And his phone number is 855-354-7233. That's 855-354-SAFE, and he'll make sure you get that book in your hands as soon as possible. Okay, David, let's get back to the subject of emotions. You know, everybody nowadays is on their smartphones, and then they come home and race to their laptops, and then they eat dinner with the TV on. You know, we're all saturated with media. And of course, we're in an election year. It's an election cycle. So people are getting really bombarded with media. How do you help people avoid the emotional abyss that they can get into, you know, in this year, especially with the election going on, when it comes to their finances?
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that you have to probably stop doing is stop listening to the talking heads on TV that are talking mostly about buying and selling stocks, because typically our investor that we're talking to are people who are about to retire or already retired, and they're in a different situation than people who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who are saving to get to where these people are at.
Right.
So most of this information that they're getting from the media doesn't even pertain to them. It's for a completely different segment of the market.
Well, a retiree is typically gearing towards withdrawing their portfolio on a systematic basis. And of course, if the market takes a swing in a downwards direction, we have insult to injury, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. The way I explain it is, let's say that your retirement is a bucket, and you have a hole at the bottom of that bucket, and that's your income. And so you're trying to pace how fast this thing is leaking.
Right.
But when you have another hole that's popped into that bucket without you knowing about it or being prepared for it, that is a drop in the stock market, and there goes another portion of your retirement bucket, so to speak, that you can't predict. So, for example, if you have a 30% drop in your portfolio, automatically you'd need to get 45% to get back. And most people, if you look back on history, you don't see 45% gains in the market.
Yeah.
But we do see 30 and 40% losses, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to get 45% in 1 year. So that's a really good point. You know, the so-called talking head, as you say, on the television might be correct with their advice for a stock pick, for example, but their advice really has to be disseminated for your particular situation. So let's move on to the subject of risk, David. Let's move from emotions to the subject of risk. You know, it's hard to believe it's been 8 years since the subprime crash of 2007, 2008. And, you know, a lot of people have got most of their money back from 2007, 2008. And the market's come a long way, but it's always a good time to recalibrate and review your picture when things are high, especially in light of the stage of life that you're in.
Oh, absolutely. So as a point of reference, I had a client who was going to retire in 2007, and his whole retirement plan was based on his stock portfolio. I had set up a living trust for him. He said, okay, I'm ready to start doing something with my retirement. Unfortunately, his retirement date was about 9 months from when we had actually did the trust, and his portfolio lost about $350,000
Wow.
of his $900,000, and he had to work an additional 4.5 years to retire.
Wow.
So a matter of months turned into several years to try to get some of that money back.
Right, right. Now, David, I know personally that you like to talk about the stock market for scaredy cats. And what the heck are you talking about?
Well, the stock market for scaredy cats, basically there's a lot of people I talk to, and in fact I spoke to a gentleman yesterday that was looking at his portfolio on a daily basis, and he'd watch it go up a few $100 and down a few $100. and he said it was just nerve-wracking and he wanted to get out. Well, fortunately, there are investments out there where you can participate in the market, get all the upside potential in many cases, but eliminate the downside risk. So in many cases, it's like going up a flight of steps. So you will go up the steps and you'll stay where you're at, or you'll go up to the next step, but you can't go backwards. It's not an up and down escalator. It is basically a flight of steps that as the market performs, you take a step forward. If the market underperforms, you stay right where you're at. So you don't lose any principal. You can only make money.
Well, that sounds pretty good. Is there anything morally inferior of being afraid of the stock market?
No, absolutely not. And what I find, and I talk to people every single day who are at that point in their life where they're about to retire and the market becomes a scarier and scarier monster. I talked to a lady a couple of days ago, and she said that her brother has been telling her, don't worry about the market. It's a long-term thing. She goes, well, I'm 75 years old, and her brother is about 20 years younger.
Wow.
So he's not worried about it because he's, still another decade away from retiring, where she's living off this money right now. She said, I just want to get out of the market.
Right. I totally understand that. Folks, we're ending our segment right here, and we'll be back after a commercial break here, but this would be a great time for you to call in and get some more information from David. He'd be happy to talk to you and give you his 12-point retirement plan, which we're going to be talking about in the next segment. Here's his phone number. It's 855-354-7233. That's 855-354-SAFE, and David will get that book in your hands, and we'll be right back to talk about the 12-point retirement plan that David also will give you with your order of his Safe Money information kit.
Did you know there are guaranteed ways to not outlive your money? Hi, I'm David Ortiz, investment advisor representative. I have a client who saved $1 million and was receiving Social Security, but his money was in the bank earning just above zero. In retirement, he was forced to draw down his savings and would have run out of money. So I restructured his investments, some for income now, some for income later, and some for future growth, all with safe and guaranteed investments. Today, he's living very comfortably and his portfolio has gone up about $200,000, even though he's still taking money out. I would be honored to meet with you to explain your options for guaranteed income throughout retirement. Just call me at 855-354-SAFE and we'll set a time to get together. We don't sell products, we find solutions. So call me at 855-354-SAFE. That's 855-354-SAFE. I'm David Ortiz. Plan smarter, live better.
Tune in to Plan Smarter and Live Better with investment advisor David Ortiz every Saturday at 3:30 p.m. right here on AM 870, The Answer.
Hello and welcome back to Plan Smarter and Live Better with David Ortiz. I'm your host, James Alden. We've been talking about the various landmines, David, in retirement in the last break.
Yeah, and I wanted to continue on a little bit about the stocks.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I know that there's three people out there. There are people who are in the market, there are people who want to get back into it, and then there are people who want to get out of it.
Right.
So that being said, I just wanted to explain a little bit about how the market works in stock prices. Stocks are priced at multiples of earnings, say 15 to 16 times its earnings. Statistically, it's usually about 16 times. We are currently in 2016, and most earnings are about 16 times. Well, that tells us two things. For example, we are not completely stretched out like the dot-com bubble or the real estate bubble. So a 30% drop doesn't look likely. However, we want a 10 to 20% growth in earnings in our portfolio. It's very difficult for the market to increase earnings to multiples of 30% in light of election years. And I'll expound a little bit more on election years and emotions as we were talking about earlier.
So yeah, you're suggesting, for example, that our current stock environment is not as inflated as it was back in 2007, like in the real estate bubble that took place at that time.
Or even the dot-com bubble. That was really bad.
Of 2001, right.
That's correct.
Exactly. Okay, so, but you're suggesting also that even though we're not overly heated or overly inflated, it doesn't look like we're going to get necessarily great future returns in the market.
I don't see it. But one of the other things I wanted to talk about that's very similar about 2000 and 2008 when we had those huge market corrections or crashes, so to speak, is those were both election years.
Interesting.
But it wasn't an ordinary election year. Those were election years where a two-term president was coming to an end.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, people are buying and selling on emotion. And because we really don't know who the next guy is going to be, people get a little nervous, and the market starts to sell off usually in those periods of time where they start to reevaluate what needs to be corrected. For example, you had mentioned in 2001, it was the dot-coms. There was irrational values in those types of stocks. And of course, in 2007 and 8, it happened to be the real estate market and the credit crunch and banks just having really horrible loans, and knowing that there was going to be a new administration. All those were had a second look taken at them, and of course, we had a 40% drop in the market.
Right.
And this year, we know that the current administration will be gone, but what we don't know is who's going to be coming in, which generates fear, and a lot of times people sell off for irrational reasons.
Otherwise, if your horse doesn't win, so to speak, you go to Canada.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it's quite crazy, the election cycle that we're in. Folks, if you're listening to us today, DavidOrtizAdvisor.com specializes in retirement planning. He has guaranteed income plans, and he even has plans that will guarantee your principal as well in many cases. And it's worth taking a look at. He has a safe money and retirement income book that he wants to put in your hands. It's 135 pages of very comprehensive, unbiased, and fair information. Here's his phone number. It's 855-354-7233. That's 855-354-SAFE. And he wants you to have this book as soon as possible in light of all the things going on in this world and in our country today. So, folks, David, you had talked about the stock market for scaredy cats, and we talked about that in the last break, and I wanted to make it really clear that to our listeners that being a scaredy cat there's nothing wrong with that if you're not comfortable with the stock market, right?
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I'll use a quick example. I have a client that I manage a substantial portfolio of investments, of which 100% of them are in safe, guaranteed investments, earning a pretty decent return. He's never been in the stock market. He's always had his money in his business or in real estate, and has just been a saver.
Right.
What drove him to me is that the bank returns that he had been getting are so pathetic that he needed to find alternatives, and the stock market was not one of them. He said he doesn't want to do stocks, bonds, or mutual funds. He doesn't like them. They make him nervous. And he has plenty of money to be able to actually to do it, but he just doesn't want to. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with being afraid of the market. And in his case, he just doesn't like it, and it makes him uncomfortable.
Right. You know, you brought up a good point there, the rates of return on the bank accounts being pathetic, as you say. I know there's just a pent-up demand in this country for 12-month rates of return, as we used to have back in 2000 and 2001 and so forth. And I know we're going to cover that in detail in another segment for a future show, because you do have some pretty impressive 12-month accounts that don't require a commitment much longer than that, and we're talking returns in the neighborhood of even 5 and 6%. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. What most people are dealing with is they're dealing with the broker who's married to their industry and their company, and these alternative investments that are very good and very safe for most people, they will never even hear about if they're dealing with their broker.
That's right. Well, we're going to cover that in another segment, folks. But David, I wanted to ask you about the idea that, you know, all of your working years, you're getting that paycheck every 2 weeks, and you're certainly used to it. And I know that when you retire, of course, the luxury of paychecks essentially comes to a grinding halt. Now, you have guided, since the 27 years you've been in this field, literally hundreds and hundreds of people into retirement, into their retirement years. And I know for about a decade or so, you've had a 12-point retirement plan that you often do with everybody you sit down with. Tell our listeners a little bit about that 12-point plan, and I know you want to offer that complimentary to our listeners today.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that a lot of people don't really take a look at is they're not looking at anything more than, I think I can afford to retire right now. Short example, I have a friend of mine I used to golf with. He was 53 or 54 years old when he retired from a large shipping company. And he figured, you know what, I can retire right now and get exactly what I'm making right now, less about 20 or 30%. I can do this. Within 3 years, he quit joining us for golf because he couldn't afford it.
Wow.
Last I heard, he was actually cycling around the South Bay collecting bottles and cans to try to make ends meet.
Unbelievable.
So the point I'm making is his income was great for that moment,
right?
But with inflation and everything else, it gobbled away at his income, and his income is pretty static, but his expenses have gone way up, and he can no longer afford to stay retired.
Well, that's a tragic story, and it's my understanding that there's essentially two choices that all Americans have for growth in their money. And statistically, over a 10-year period, you should be fine in the market if you're comfortable with the market. But a lot of people aren't comfortable. And what would you recommend your listeners today, David, consider if they're not comfortable with the market, but they want some type of return, some type of market return, and they're retired?
Right. Obviously, the bank's not an option because you don't get a return in the bank. Banks work on a theory called arbitrage, which simply means they're in the lending business. They lend money, they get it back at a certain interest rate, and then they pay their savers.
Right.
But banks are getting money for close to nothing from the federal government, so why would they pay you a little bit more than they can get it for free?
Right.
Just to give you interest? No, they're really in the business to only lend money.
Right.
So we have to look for other ways to get an interest rate
Okay.
or a return on your money.
Okay.
And banks are definitely not it, but that doesn't mean that there's not safe ways to do it. A very popular product out there actually is an indexed product where you can put your money in, you can get the return and growth of the market, but there's no downside risk, so your principal is always guaranteed. In fact, many of these have a guaranteed return on the income value that they provide, anywhere as I've seen as high as 10%. But many of them also offer you a bonus from anywhere from, I've seen from as little as 2% to as high as 10%. So if you have $100,000, you put in the account, and right away you have $110,000.
And you have a guarantee of no loss of principal due to the market in your retirement years, which is kind of attractive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I always talk about is the unicorn investment. Everybody wants three things from their investment. They want a good rate of return, they want safety, and they want liquidity. Unfortunately, you can't get those in one product.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't get all those things in one product. Is impossible. Otherwise, you'd be retired yourself at your youthful age, wouldn't you?
I would be, but we have to look around and be more diversified, and that's why one of the things that I had mentioned before is that there is a certain bias in the industry where you have your stockbroker basically who's married to an industry, and
Right.
their idea of safe money is taking your money out of stocks and putting it in cash and riding the storm out,
Right.
Or putting it in some other safe investment, but you may lose liquidity. For example, a CD.
Right.
You might get 1% if you're really lucky, but you can't touch your money for 5 years. Well, if you're 72 years old and you're living off your savings, how are you going to be able to live off of a CD if you can't touch it?
Right. That's a good point, David. So, folks, it's pretty self-evident. If you fail to plan in your retirement, you certainly plan to fail, and that's where DavidOrtizAdvisor.com comes in. He helps you with your plans so that you don't fail and that you can set your retirement years up with income that you cannot outlive. And he's all about peace of mind and creating peace of mind, and he has thousands of clients that he's helped through the years set up their retirements in a comfortable fashion. Is there anything else you want to share, David, before we go to the end of the segment today?
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to share is that the most important thing that people talk to me about is their income. Like I had mentioned in earlier broadcasts, there are no pensions right now, so people are living on Social Security, but their expenses don't go away. They still have to put gas in their car, buy groceries, pay utilities. So the biggest concern that people have is, do I have enough money that I don't have to worry about income for the rest of my life?
Exactly. They say in real estate that a successful business franchise is location, location, location. And of course, the mantra today with retirement, David, is income, income, income. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to have income in your retirement years. That's all there is to it, and it has to be contractually guaranteed. So call David today. Here's his number. It's 855-354-7233. That's 855-354-SAFE. And David will get you on the path to income, income, income. Thanks for listening, everyone.
You've been listening to Plan Smarter and Live Better with investment advisor David Ortiz. Advice given on today's program is not intended to be used for your specific financial planning, but only as a general guideline about investing and protecting your money. For specific guidance on your financial strategies, call David Ortiz at 855-354-SAFE. That's 855-354-SAFE. Again, call 855-354-SAFE. To learn more about David Ortiz, log on to DavidOrtizAdvisor.com. That web address is DavidOrtizAdvisor.com. Join us again next week at this same time. Until then, plan smarter and live better.